when I was a young man in the carnival, there were two docs on the show. And when I first joined the carnival, I was known as Little Doc. The other guy was older and was known as Big Doc. Eventually, the older guy left the show, and I just became Doc. And I've had that name ever since. I'm about 70 years old, and the name is stuck. My parents. I don't recall my parents because my father was from Mexico. He came across the border and married my mother, and within a year he went back across the border. I've never seen him. I don't know where he's at. I have no clue to his history. My mother did not want to raise me, and so she kind of pushed me off of my grandparents, who were wonderful people. And they raised me until I was about 12 years old. My grandfather and my grandmother were both from English descent. They can trace their family lineage back to the 1600s. And my grandfather, I guess, was a kind of a traveling man. He had many jobs. My grandmother was a homemaker. And the only memories I have of them are pleasant memories. I know they love me, and I know they raised me well. And they tried to do everything they could do in their power to make my life pleasant. In a environment that was constantly on the move. We lived many places, my grandparents and I. We lived in Florida, here in Florida, California, Indiana, Massachusetts. My grandparents were always traveling, and I guess that's probably where I got the nomadic influence. My grandfather had many jobs. He had an office here in St. Petersburg, Florida, Key Productions Incorporated. He was instrumental in the early days of television, and he had his own television show. When television shows were popular on local channels in the afternoon for children, he had his own children's program where he dressed up as a train engineer and had these little model trains, and the camera would pan to the model trains and then pan to him dressed in an engineer's outfit, and he would show cartoons and have popular guests for the children on, and it was about a 30-minute show, I guess. Then later on he branched out into the game shows and wasn't very successful with those. I remember he had a job as a fry cook in Massachusetts, cooking fried clams on Cape Cod. You know, he was always a very pleasant individual, and my grandmother was always more, I guess, demure, but she was warm and loving, and they took care of me, and I'm very grateful for the attention and the care they gave me when I was growing up. At 12 years old, my grandfather contracted a disease called emphysema. He only had one lung. He had the first lung destroyed in the First World War from mustard gas, and he developed emphysema in the second lung and had to go to Chicago, where he went into the Veterans Hospital and never saw him again. My grandmother, unable to take care of me, kind of relegated my upbringing to my uncle and aunt, who were circus performers with the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. And they had retired off the road and lived in LaPorte, Indiana. So I went to high school in LaPorte, Indiana for a brief time. My uncle and aunt and I did not get along very well. They had 4 girls, and I guess the last thing they wanted in the world was a prepubescent boy growing up in a household with 4 girls. They made life very miserable for me. So at the earliest opportunity, at 14, the carnival came to town, and I ran away with the carnival. And I remember my uncle followed me to the spot the carnival was playing next, about 125 miles away from the port, and said to the show owner, "You want him, you can have him." And that pretty much explains my early start in the carnival business. I grew up on a little show called the Drago Amusements, and it was wonderful. We played these little corn fairs, and I remember warm summer days and just the love and affection of the people around me. It was a great place to grow up. I can't think of any other way I would have preferred to reach adulthood. We opened at 6 o'clock in the evening on most days, opened on a Tuesday, and so that gave us a couple of days in these little towns to see whatever sights we were going to see. Wasn't much, and to enjoy the ambiance of the small towns. And it was in the 60s, so it was a transformation for not only the carnival business, but America as well. These small towns would soon disappear, and they would be influenced by the people who moved into them and made them urban areas, or suburban areas rather. And now they've all kind of grown and have shopping malls and multiplex theaters. But this was before that, and they were just quiet little towns. Who influenced my choices in life? I don't know. A lot of people influenced my choices in life because I was around a lot of people. And when you grew up on a carnival, you had an extended family. You might have 30 parents instead of just 2. And although they weren't restrictive, they didn't let me get out of hand too far. And they, would correct me if I was getting into too much trouble. Of course, you always get into a little trouble as a kid, but they wouldn't let me stray too far from the fold. They influenced me in many ways. They taught me the ethic of hard work. They taught me the ethic of honesty. They taught me the ethic of being in a social atmosphere with other people, how to act and react, and the things they held of value in their lives they imparted to me. And some of the things I embraced and some of the things I discarded. But most of the things that they taught me were very positive things. And I'm very grateful for their... When I turned 18, I got drafted into the Army. And Vietnam was going on. I didn't want to go. And I actually dodged the draft for about 6 months. And they scooped me up. And make a long story short, I did go into the Army. I did 13 months in Vietnam. And when I got out of the Army, lo and behold, who was playing a spot? I got out in Fort Ord, California, and who was playing a spot in Monterey, home of Fort Ord, but the West Coast shows. And so I ended up once again on a traveling carnival. It seems like fate or deja vu or whatever you want to call it. I've spent 53 years in the carnival business, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. Even the bad things taught me lessons. I never really received a high school education because when I left my uncle, I guess I just started my sophomore year in high school and I never went back. But I've been a voracious reader all my life, and I have educated myself, and I would hold my education up, even though it's self-taught, with most college graduates. I'm not toot my own horn here, but I just know who I am. The carnival business is unique in the fact that not everyone is cut out for it. I like to say many are called, but few are chosen to spend their lives in the carnival business, because it's a desperately hard and sometimes brutal life. But it has its ups and downs, and the ups are wonderful. You get to travel, you get to meet new friends, not just once in a while, but almost every week. People are coming and going from a carnival. They migrate in and migrate out. And you learn many aspects of mechanics. For instance, you set up and tear down the rides. Each ride is different. So you learn the mechanical aspects of that ride. The games, operating the games are fun because you interact with the people. You have to interface with them, and you have to get to know a little synopsis of their personalities, and it's a lot of fun. I've always considered the fact that I was with the carnival all my life to be beneficial. I've loved it. I've led a big life, a good life, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything, neither fame nor fortune nor anything else, because I've been allowed to do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it for the most part. And if you lead a life like that, you have no regrets at the end of it. My private life, I guess that's why they call it a private life, because it should be private. I was master of my Masonic Lodge in 2005. If you are aware of what goes into Freemasonry and the amount of work that's involved in becoming the master of a lodge, you'll realize they gave 6 or 7 years to the idea of that position. I learned a lot. I'm very happy to have been the master of my Masonic Lodge, DeSoto 105 in Riverview, Florida. I've been married 3 times. My first wife and I were married when we were very young. And I suppose we just outgrew the marriage. That sometimes happens. People grow up, grow out of the relationship, and go off on their own. That's more or less what happened. My second wife and I were married for 23 years, and she passed away. It was a devastating loss to me, and I have since recovered and remarried. I'm married to a wonderful woman named Debbie, who is the light of my life and is everything that I was ever looking for in this world. I have 2 daughters from my first wife, Marie and Virginia. Virginia being the youngest, Marie being the oldest and probably the most adventurous. Got into a little bit of trouble now and then. She was an adventurous spirit, and she just wanted more than life could give her. Virginia has always been a rock. She's been the anchor of my 2 children, and has always made the right decisions. Went to Europe after high school, stayed in Europe for a few years, traveling around. She married an Air Force sergeant from Apollo Beach, Florida, that she had gone to school with. Met the guy in England. So you see how deja vu works, or serendipity, or whatever you want to call it. She met this young man who's a very nice, fine young man. He now works in the aerospace industry on the new Mars rocket in Louisiana. He works for Rolls-Royce. My grandkids, I raised my grandkids. My oldest daughter had 2 children, Mark and Sierra, and she didn't really, wasn't capable of taking care of them. So I raised them from the time they were babies. And Mark is now living in St. Petersburg. He has a family of his own. I have a great-grandchild, Alexis, by he and his wife. And he's a very fine, very well-grounded young man. Sierra is the love of my life. She's a delightful child. She's always happy, always bubbling with enthusiasm. Loves her grandpa, and I love her. She's just delightful. She's in her 20s now, and she works at a golf course in Lakeland, and she actually holds down two jobs, but the golf course is the best one for her, and she makes good money. Drives a new car, better than I am. That's my family. Well, the childhood dreams I've implemented, I guess you would say they've been quite a few. Some kids aspired to be airline pilots and astronauts, but I came from an environment where we were always on the move, so I guess I got that traveling gene. And my uncle and aunt having been in the circus business, I just naturally gravitated to outdoor show business. And I've always dreamed of moving around. I like the idea of the nomadic lifestyle. I don't care to be in one place for very long. Travel really broadens one's ideas and gives you a better concept of who people are, who your neighbors are. It teaches you many things. It teaches you to be self-sufficient, teaches you to be aware of the scams and the schemers and the dreamers and all those folks out there who can influence your life in both positive and negative ways. It gives you a broader education, I guess you'd say. I wanted to be a traveling man all my life. When I was young, I read books about traveling men and sailors and wanderers and roving gypsies, and I always loved that lifestyle. It was not just the romantic aspects of that lifestyle, but the idea of the personal freedom that you had when you lived that lifestyle. You were never tied down to any one thing or one idea, and if something got stale, you simply moved to the next thing in your life. I've always been grateful that I chose this path in life. I've always loved the life I've led, and I guess all the dreams that I've had have come true in one way or another, because I've been able to do what I wanted to do, and I have no regrets. If I have any regrets, it's the fact that I lost my wife. That was a devastating blow. We shared everything, every thought, every idea, and she was taken suddenly from me. And, you know, I never had a chance to say goodbye. I never had a chance to just to tell her those things that you would want to say to somebody before they departed this life. It was beyond words. Okay. My favorite saying, I suppose, would be, no good deed goes unpunished. And I have learned that this is true. Many times you extend the hand of friendship only to come back with teeth marks in it. Though you should never be jaundiced to the fact that the opportunities of a lasting relationship and deep friendship abound. The world is a very beautiful place, and it's full of heroes and wonderful people, and so you should never be jaundiced in extending your hand in friendship or help to other people. But you should be aware that sometimes they bite, and it's not always a bed of roses. In growing up, the things I didn't have but wanted, you know, first of all, when you grow up as a child, a young child, you have to be aware that you're poor. And I never was aware that I was poor. I had a bike that I bought for $3. and rode it everywhere. Now, I lived on the other side of the bay, St. Petersburg, and it was relatively undeveloped at that time. Mostly spoil banks, sand dunes, and single-story motels. We would ride our bikes up and down these sand dunes, and we would ride them to Pass a Grill and see the boats. Uh, you know, we didn't have a lot of things of intrinsic value.
Right.
Like I say, you have to realize you're poor, and I didn't go without anything, the necessities of life, but we didn't have any of the luxuries. We lived here in Florida in the 1950s, and in those days, not everyone had home air conditioners. Most people cooled their houses with a couple of circular fans and jalousie windows, let the breeze blow through. I remember if my grandmother wanted an air conditioner fixed, she ran down to the supermarket and spent an hour or two going through the canned goods in the produce aisle. We didn't have air conditioning. We had terrazzo floors that were cool in summertime, and I remember one Christmas, I got a bag of plastic soldiers. I guess they cost about $1, and an old record player. And that was a very big Christmas for me, and a very pleasant one. You know, we didn't eat steak every night. We maybe ate meat once a week. But my grandmother was a very creative cook and could do a lot of things with very little. And I was never a skinny kid because I had plenty to eat. But maybe not the things that kids of the day would consider edible. But we, didn't do without. There were always fish that I could catch, and some days we'd ride our bikes down to John's Pass, and the head boats would come in. And the head boats would have all these tourist fishermen aboard that were staying in motels, and they had no way of cooking their catch. So they give the catch that they had of the day to us kids on our bikes, and we'd ride it home. And so we red snapper and every kind of fish you can imagine. I don't think I went without anything. I certainly didn't go without the most primary of necessities, and I always had plenty of love. And I think if that's what you have, then you have enough. I was always loved by my grandparents, and there was never any doubt in my mind that I was loved by my grandparents. And if we didn't have the intrinsic things that we needed sometimes, that was just the way it was. And I have never regretted a single moment of my childhood, and can never look back on it and say that I was deprived or that I didn't have the things that I wish I had. I didn't wish for anything more than I had. I was very happy and very satisfied with what was given to me and what I had in life. Do I consider myself a role model? Well, I don't think I'm a role model. My ego isn't that big. I don't think that any young person would aspire to the lifestyle that I've had, even if they could, which they can't do anymore anyway, because society has progressed beyond the point where you have the latitude to live the lifestyle I've led. I've always remained a non-person, a person that stayed under the radar. You can't do that in this modern day and age. Everything is computerized. Your entire lifestyle is on a chip or a program somewhere, and you can't stay under the radar and be a non-person. Who's my role model? I don't have a separate individual role model. There was a fellow one time who was my mentor, I guess you'd say, named Al Sullivan. He was a big man. He was a unit manager on the West Coast shows. He owned concessions on the West Coast shows. And he was just a jovial, warm human being who laughed easily, laughed loud, and everybody liked this guy. I can't think of a single human being that disliked this man. And he was well respected by not only myself, but everyone who ever knew him. And he taught me many things in life. Uh, he taught me how to understand people a little better. And he taught me, I don't know, he taught me so much that I can't even tell you all the things that I learned from this man. But I loved this man. He maybe was the father I never had. He was great. He was great. He passed away. He caught cancer and passed away quite a few years ago. And I miss his company. Even today at 70, I miss his company. I can still hear him laughing and joking, and we would ride in the car together going from spot to spot. And it was always, he would make me laugh or I would make him laugh almost the whole trip. He was a wonderful guy, and probably the single greatest influence I outside of family that I've had in my life, and I really cherish that relationship. Book or movie that changed my outlook on life. Though I know you don't want favorite movies, my favorite movie's Dr. Zhivago. I guess I like the tragic endings to a movie for some reason. I don't know why. I like movies about people. I don't like the crash and bang and smash up and pyrotechnics and 37 bodies in the first 15 minutes. I don't care for that type of a splatter movie. I like the interplay between individuals who have a relationship and who have understandings. And that's what I really like. In so far as books are concerned, I think the earliest book that I ever read that influenced my life was a series about a character named Todd Moran, who was a runaway kid like myself, who just joined the merchant navy, and he went around the world with his comrades and experienced all these wonderful adventures. One of the books was Captain of the Araby, which was the ship that he was on, the Araby, and it had many colorful characters, and that influenced my life because I could see myself as that kid, that Todd Moran character, and all these characters that the author had written about were so vivid in my mind, and I could see them, and I could almost smell the scent of the boiler room where they worked, and it was just a great influence on me. Probably one of the first influences that I ever had that made me want to be a nomadic traveling man. My hobbies? Well, I guess this museum is my hobby. It's been my hobby now for about 3 or 4 years. It allows an individual to be creative, to be expressive. If you like working with your hands like I do, you can build the exhibits and put things in their proper order in a certain perspective that makes it appealing to the general public that comes into the museum. I find this to be a wonderful hobby, and as well as my work. Don't tell anybody, but I probably would do this for nothing if I didn't get the small salary I got. I like it that much. As a carnival guy, the business is your hobby. you don't get a chance to have many outside hobbies because, first of all, you're moving from spot to spot every week, and so you don't lay down any roots. Secondly, you live in a very small, contained environment in the format of an RV or house trailer, so you don't have a lot of room to expand a hobby. I guess stamp collecting would be about the only hobby you could, have in your life. Anything else, like model building, would just take up too much room. Also, if the fact that your time is consumed almost from the time you get up in the morning until you fall into the bed at night. The last years that I was in the business, I had food trailers. And in the food business, you have to get up early in the morning and buy the products that you're going to prepare and sell for that day. That means you have to go to Sam's Club, and you have to go to the meat market, and you have to go to the produce place, and it's a whirlwind of activity almost every single day. And when you get back, now all that stuff has to be put away and stored and categorized. Then it's time to open the awnings on the trailer, and you work to the general public all evening, sometimes all day and all evening, until about 11:30, 12 o'clock, sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning. Then, of course, you close up the trailers and you have to have a bite to eat, which usually means trying to find some little restaurant that's still open. Sometimes you have to drive 30 miles to a Waffle House down by the interstate entrance to get a late supper. By then it's 2:30 in the morning, and all you want to do is fall into bed.
In the 60s.
Then you begin the routine the same way the next morning. So it's doesn't leave much time for hobbies.
As well. These small towns
there's no horseback riding, no sailing, no surfing, none of that. It's just
people who moved into
the business is the hobby. The business is your life. It consumes all of your life. If you
shopping malls
are to be successful,
multiplex
you
theaters.
don't have room for much else. And that's all right, because your life is full, your life is rich, and you don't miss hobbies or don't have time for them, don't need them in your life. Best advice I've been given, well, I've been given a lot of advice, so some of it I took with a grain of salt, and some of it I embraced. I don't know what the best advice as a single piece of advice would be. I guess it's just, to enjoy the quality of your life, because that's all you get. You don't have anything else. You have your life, and the quality of it is what you make of it. If you want to be despondent and depressed all the time and say, oh, woe is me, I didn't get this, I was deprived as a child, and the world has kicked me in the teeth, and it didn't, and whatever things you had happen to you as a child, well, that was when you were a child. You're an adult now. Get over it. And embrace the life that the world has given you, because it's the only one you're going to get. And you might as well make the best of it, and you might as well be happy. So find something that makes you happy and explore that avenue. And just laugh a lot, love a lot, enjoy your life. Principles in my life. Well, I think the principles in my life would be, first of all, honesty. If you can't be honest with those people who are the closest around you, you are going to have a real big problem with your life. You should never lie to your wife, never lie to your friends. The other people come and go in your life. Well, there's varying degrees of lies. There's white lies, black lies. We all know that. But I think honesty. They say honesty is the best policy. Well, that's true, especially with the people who are closest to you, because once you lie to them and they catch you in a lie, you've broken the covenant with them. And there's always that little voice in the back of their head that questions what you'll say from that point on. So be honest with the people you love. And they'll respect you and they'll love you back for it, and you'll find your life is a much easier thing if you keep that in mind. What question would I like to answer that you didn't ask? Well, I don't really have an idea about what questions I'd like to answer. My life has been enjoyable, and I can't think of anything. Do I believe in a life after death? Well, honestly, I do not. I don't believe that anything happens to you other than you become the same stuff you were before you were born. Your molecular structure decomposes and you become the stuff of the universe, which maybe isn't a bad thing. I don't believe you go to heaven and sit on a cloud and play a golden harp with Jesus. That's a bunch of horse shit. I don't believe in that you're reborn and come back as a dog or that kind of thing. I believe that you get one shot at this. This is your life. What you take away from it is all you're going to get. And when you die, you just become the dust and the molecules and the atoms that you were before you were alive. Maybe you go back to the stars. We're all just elements in the elemental table. We're comprised of carbon atoms, and I think that's probably what you go back to, being carbon atoms. I'd like to think that there is life after death, but I'm too much of a pragmatic person to really believe that. I suppose that the most positive influence that I have is my wife, Debbie. She's a treasure. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. What and who supports you in your life? My wife, I guess, supports me in my life. She's the reward I get for having lived the way I've lived. If I've lived a good life, she's the reward I have for it. And she supports me in almost everything I do. She's tolerant, she's patient, she's kind. She doesn't really ever have anything bad to say. Is she perfect? Of course, nobody's perfect. But she's good for me. And I'm really glad, I'm really fortunate to have her in my life, especially at this time in my life when a lot of guys die lonely old men. But I don't have that. I have her warmth and her comfort and her understanding, and she's a real treasure. I'm very glad she's in my life. Guiding principles, well, do I like people? Well, I like some people. I don't like some people, like everybody. Those people I don't like, I stay away from, and I want them to stay away from me. I leave them alone. I don't talk to them. I don't want to have anything to do with them. Those people that I like, I want to spend a lot of time around. I want to get to know them. I want to get to know their life and who they are, and because they enrich my life with their being. I have a lot of friends. I have more acquaintances than I have friends. There's a difference. An acquaintance is somebody you meet and you can take or leave. But a friend, and I guess a true friend, you don't have many of those. A true friend is somebody who get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and bail you out of jail. There are not very many of those. I have a few of those, and I love them dearly and cherish that friendship. 3 pieces of advice would give to future generations. Work hard. There's no substitute for hard work. I come from a generation that understood that believed in the principle of hard work. Though you may not see the rewards from the hard work you do right away, it's like money in the bank. You invest it. And investing in hard work, it'll bear rewards. It'll bear fruit later on. We mentioned honesty, I guess. That's one. Don't get depressed. A lot of people get depressed over the least, most insignificant things in this world. Don't do that, because the world is a wonderful place, full of heroism, full of wonderful, beautiful people, and they all have exciting stories to tell. I could never understand how people could be depressed and go off and kill themselves or have to take drugs to bring themselves out of that depression. I get up every day and I'm wide-eyed and full of enthusiasm about the people I'm going to meet on the day and the life experiences I'm going to have on the day. Maybe the carnival business has done that for me. It's taught me to be enthusiastic about life, because every single solitary day that you woke up when you lived on the road, you had the opportunity to do wonderful things, meet wonderful people. And many days I did. And that's always stayed with me. Even through the tragic times of my life, I've been able to see the brighter light, the rainbow at the end of the cloudy storm. But yeah, I think probably be enthusiastic about life. Don't be depressed, because it's really a great life. And like I said, it's all we got. If I had 3 wishes, what would they be? Well, of course, I want to be rich. One thing about the carnival business, you have about as much fun as you could have with your clothes on, but you don't make a whole lot of money, and you don't ever end up rich. Some people do, but they're few and far between. I suppose that's true in most aspects of life. That's why they are called the 1%ers. Only 1% ever reach those heights. I, at this time of my life, would wish that I had a greater fortune, but my fortune's been in other things, and like I say, I don't regret anything. But if I had a wish, I would wish to be rich. I'm very healthy, so that wish has already been granted. At 70, as you see me, I'm enthusiastic and I'm in great health. Could stand a couple.